The Dominican List is an audiovisual account and publication highlighting the contributions of Dominicans to the United States of America for more than 5 decades. The Dominican List tells where Dominicans came from, areas where they settled, and where they're leaving their mark. It presents the men and women who are distinguishing themselves in the arts, business, community service, education, literature, communications, government, politics, the judiciary, science, and sports.
The first non-Native American settler in New York City is a man named Juan Rodriguez, who came from the island of Santo Domingo on a Dutch ship. And the Dutch, as you know, the Dutch were very interested in colonizing New York. It was called New Amsterdam because they did actually colonize it. But before their arrival, they had made trips just to check the place out, and they would interact with Native Americans. And during one of those early voyages of the Dutch, there was this ship that brought Juan Rodriguez, and Juan Rodriguez took a look at the place, sort of said, you know what, I'd like to try my luck here in this place. And he asked the ship captains to just drop him off there. And they gave him a couple of hatchets and some goods, enough to survive for a while. And a ship passed by a year later, and they learned about Juan Rodriguez, who was still alive. So he had survived a year, interacting with the Native Americans. So for all intents and purposes, that person from Santo Domingo is the very first non-Native American settler of New York.
At the beginning of the 20th century, Dominicans pioneered to the United States. Juan Maria Diaz migrated to the United States in 1923. At the age of 19, he settled in New York City. There were few Dominicans in New York City in the 20s. He spoke English and French, in addition to Spanish and some Italian. Owing to an interest in New York City politics, Diaz became an active member of the Democratic Party, and his political affiliations in New York included elected officials and union leaders. During World War II, he also served in the National Guard. His daughter, Kay Palacios, became one of the first 2 Dominicans elected to public office in the United States. One of the trailblazers settling in New York in the 1930s was then Dominican ambassador to the United States, Pedro Arache. His son, Dr. Perez, would later flee the Dominican Republic due to political oppression and practice medicine in New York. His son, Tom Edward Perez, born in the United States, is today the Assistant Attorney General for the Civil Rights Division of the United States Department of Justice.
You know, we all share so many of the same stories. I feel the presence of my parents here. They're regrettably both deceased. Their goal was to raise their children and then move back home. Regrettably, they both died before they were able to move back home. My dad died when I was 12, and my mother died a few years ago. But they will always be in my heart, and my grandparents as well. My maternal grandfather, Pedro Arache, was the ambassador to the United States in the early 30s from the Dominican Republic until he spoke out against Trujillo after the massacre of the Haitians. And he became really the moral compass of our family, and I think the conscience of the exile community for many years.
most of the 70s, urban America was facing serious challenges. There was an epidemic of heroin, gang warfare, the flight of capital from inner city neighborhoods. Vandals were torching private and public property, and there was general urban decay. The impact of the civil rights movement was being felt across the country, from Atlanta, Georgia to Philadelphia, from Los Angeles, California, to the Bronx and Harlem burning, to Newark, Patterson, and other communities in New Jersey. Urban America was falling apart. Urban America was broken. These were the conditions under which a sizable number of Dominicans fleeing political instability and economic oppression in the Dominican Republic began arriving in Puerto Rico, New York, New Jersey, and other cities in the United States. Dominicans began arriving in New Jersey in the 1950s. The Ocasio-Ravelo family arrived in Newark and the Mendoza family in Patterson in 1947.
My name is Jeanette Ravello, and I came to this country through my mother, who came here in 1949. She met my stepfather here, who came in 1947. They worked together, and eventually in 1950 I arrived in Idlewild Airport in New York. I came through Pan American, and from there we moved to Newark, New Jersey. We've been in Newark, New Jersey ever since.
Pedro Mendoza llegó con sus hermanos, que son 4 hermanos. Vinieron en el 1946. En ese tiempo no habían casi vuelos directos, no habían.
¿Y dónde llegaba el
Entonces ellos cogieron un avión que iba haciendo escala, vamos a decir, a Cuba, hasta Florida. Y de Florida a Nueva York ellos vinieron en tren. Llegaron a Nueva York a reunirse con sus padres que ya estaban aquí hacía 2 años. Vine de la República Dominicana en el 1948. Cuando yo vine ya habían vuelos directos y yo vine de la Pan American, de la capital hasta Nueva York, La Guardia. Pero ¿sabe cuántas horas? Toda la noche. Eran 4 motores. Y vine a casarme con Pedro Mendoza, que nos conocíamos allá por 3 años. Y entonces yo vine a casarme porque era más fácil para mí venir aquí que él regresar allá. Llegaron a vivir a Manhattan, en la calle 66 ahí, de Broadway. Y luego nos mudamos a Long Island y llegamos a New Jersey en el 1962. En Patterson después, a pocos años, hubieron revueltas de latinos. Pasó algo que no sé qué pasó con los latinos, que hicieron algo y la policía, ellos estaban contra de la policía entonces, ¿no? Y se hicieron se aglomeraron todo en el parque ese que se llama ahora Roberto Clemente. Y yo me acuerdo como hoy que yo oía un murmullo porque yo vivía en Park Avenue ahí mismo. Y veo al sacerdote de mi iglesia tratando de mantenerle el orden, pero ellos seguían. Y entonces ellos bajaron toda la Market Street, destruyeron todos los cristales de todos los comercios, los bancos, las tiendas. Y la policía le comenzó a tirar lágrimas, tú sabes, bombas así. Nosotros cogimos el carro y nos fuimos para Nueva York, porque teníamos mucho miedo de que nos pasara algo, ¿no? Y cuando regresamos, la ciudad de Patterson parecía que había pasado una guerra. Los comercios tenían madera, todos los cristales los habían destruido. Y sé que según yo escuché era que ellos iban rompiendo todo, ¿no?
I was living on Wilson Avenue in Newark, New Jersey, the ironbound section of Newark. It's always been separated by the diversity in ethnicities. There was Polish, German, Irish, and Italians. That was the part that they dominated, you know, the municipal arena. The mayor was Irish, the policemen were Irish. At that point, they dominated. I encountered a lot of prejudices. Why? They used to call me, they would stand in the corner and call me Chiquita Banana. And I was so embarrassed. And I was humble, and I would lower my head and walk on the other side of the street. We were accepted, actually, this little dark girl in a white neighborhood, but we were accepted because my parents were white. We were friendly. My first soda pop came out of that pop store, mom and pop store. I never tasted a soda pop that had ice cream that I used to call a float. That was my first experience. That gentleman from that delicatessen, he was German. When the riot started, we were very frightened. And he got all his friends, and they all had rifles, guns. As a matter of fact, they gave me an antique gun that it said, stay in your apartment, and if anybody comes to shoot. I was so frightened. I'll never forget Mr. Weber. Mr. Weber, he gave me my first hamburger, my first hot dog, my first soda pop, and my first float. He became friends with my parents, and he was there for us, and I really appreciate him. He took up arms with all his friends. He gathered the neighborhood, and they went to Penn Station in Newark, New Jersey, and they stood in line, making sure nobody passed across to the Down Neck area. The rioters that were coming from the South Ward, the Central Ward, they burnt their houses. It was so much killings and the dogs, and it was really frightening.
Under these conditions, a sizable number of Dominicans fleeing political instability and economic oppression in the Dominican Republic began arriving in Puerto Rico, New York, New Jersey, Boston, Rhode Island, Lawrence, and other cities in the United States.
I am Dr. Hugo M. Morales. I'm a physician, psychiatrist in the state of New York. I came to this country in 1956.
3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, rock. 5, 6, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, rock. 9, 10, 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock, rock. We're gonna rock. Around 10 o'clock tonight. Have some fun when the clock strikes 1. We're gonna rock around the clock tonight. We're gonna rock, rock, rock till broad daylight. We're gonna rock around the clock tonight.
I have been working very, very hard for so many years. Sometimes during my residency, I worked for more than 100 hours a week, and I finally made it. I have been the only Dominican that has been created an outpatient psychiatric clinic in the state of New York. Was the largest one for more than 30 years. I also became the only Dominican to have the Ellis Gold Medal, and also the only Dominican that has been appointed to CUNY, City University of New York, as a board trustee. I was reappointed by Governor Elliott, and I continue to serve in this capacity. I have been privileged to work and appointed by the 5 past governors of the state of New York in different capacity. And I have the privilege and honor of seeing and participating in the development of our Dominican community in the state of New York. I have seen this Dominican to evolve in today a very important and vibrant community with a great deal of future for all of us.
1, 2, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, rock. 5, 6, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, rock. 9, 10, 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock, rock. We're gonna rock around the clock tonight. Put your glad rags on, join me home. We'll have some fun when the clock strikes 1. We're gonna rock around the clock tonight. We're gonna rock, rock, rock till broad daylight. We're gonna rock around the clock.
My name is Juan Pichardo. I'm a state senator in Rhode Island. When I arrived here in Providence, there were less than 5,000 Latinos. Dominicans were very few. The Dominican community has had presence since the early 60s. The story began with Doña Fefa, where she owned a bodega on Broad Street.
La primera bodega que puse fui yo. Cuando yo vine a Santo Domingo, ay, no me acuerdo si fue en el 52. Bueno, fue mucha, cuando yo vine aquí Trujillo estaba vivo, cuando eso no dejaba pasar a nadie, pero me dejó pasar.
Fefa was one of those Dominicans that came in to Rhode Island when there was no one that could communicate in English.
Y yo ahí en el G-Center, tú sabes, G-Center del agua atrás, el Amber y por ahí, eso lo que había era una plaza y había unos judíos blancos. Tú sabes que tenían una marqueta moderna. Ahí había un liquor store. Y habían 2 o 3 casitas y cositas ahí. Y un liquor store. Entonces mi esposo, cuando lo iba a tomar, iba ahí a comprar su botella. Y ahí se encontró un judío, que el dueño era judío. Pero el judío que se encontró ahí era otro judío, amigo de él, cuñado, el judío Abraham. Abraham, y murió. Ese hombre fue quien nos ayudó a mí y a mi esposo. Y a empezar a trabajar para poner bodega.
We are making contributions at every level, but there's even more. When we look at the student population in the state of Rhode Island, in the city of Providence, 97% of the student population in the city of Providence are of Hispanic descent. Of those, the majority are of Dominican descent. So that means that the school system has a strong representation of Dominican Americans at every level, elementary, middle, and high school.
Rhode Island is one of the states, small state, but one of the largest Dominican American population in the United States. We're about 45,000 according to the census. And as you know, there might be some more. But we are per capita one of the most populated states in the country. We enjoy the privilege of having state senator, judge, mayor, city council, school board members within the greater city of Providence, and a state representative also.
So the future of the state of Rhode Island, the future of Providence is linked to the growth and development and the participation of Dominican Americans. That is the future. We are the future. We are the new America.
I came to the United States in 1973, right through the Newark. Actually, my stop was from Dominican Republic into Puerto Rico because of the ministry, and then from Puerto Rico into Newark, New Jersey, directly into the city of Patterson. So I came in with no papers. My encounter with America was through the ghetto. Okay, Patterson is a ghetto. So my view of what America was all about is this ghetto in which people was living in the midst of the ghetto.
Yo llegué en enero del 1978 al aeropuerto Kennedy. Me recuerdo exactamente, tenía unos 25 años y llegué un día que había una nevada fuerte, con una brisa muy fuerte. Yo vine solamente con un jacket que tenía, me parece que el único que tenía en esa época. Entonces me fueron a recibir al aeropuerto y me llevaron un coat. Y entonces yo le dije, no, pero yo ando con un jacket. Y la suegra mía me dijo, no, tú no puedes salir afuera con ese jacket, te va a congelar, tú necesitas este coat. Entonces me pusieron el coat, que me quedaba, por cierto, corto, porque parece que se lo pusieron prestado a una persona que era más pequeña que yo. Y entonces, cuando salí afuera, que vi la ráfaga de brisa que estaban, digo, ay, Dios mío, pero realmente me iba a congelar si no me pongo el coat que me trae.
New York City was a first stop for Dominicans. They then crossed the George Washington Bridge to Patterson, which was the textile capital of the time. They were following the abundant jobs in the manufacturing industry. They also came through the Lincoln Tunnel to Jersey City, Union City, and Newark, where construction and hospitality positions were easily secured.
Yo trabajé en una factoría me llevaron a una factoría que hacía botellas para perfume en Hackensack. Me recuerdo, esa factoría estaba en la South Newman Street en Hackensack. Y fue una vecina mía puertorriqueña que me llevó y me consiguió trabajo ahí.
There was a lot of work in the factories, and Dominicans used to come into America, into Patterson specifically, into New Jersey, to work in factories, no matter what the background were.
En 1985 nosotros creamos lo que se llamó aquí la Federación de Asociaciones Dominicanas del Estado de Nueva Jersey, que fue la institución madre de donde nacen todas las otras instituciones dominicanas. Esa organización estaba compuesta por clubes culturales, organizaciones religiosas, organizaciones deportivas, organizaciones estudiantiles. Entonces, donde no había organizaciones de base dominicana, entonces nosotros la creamos. Cuando nosotros empezamos esta organización, solamente existían en Nueva Jersey 2 clubes culturales, que era el Club San Andrés en Hoboken y el Club Santo Domingo de Newark. Donde primero se hizo la bandera dominicana en el estado de Nueva Jersey es en Newark, el Club Santo Domingo, que estaba Daniel Duncan. ¿Te acuerdas de Daniel Duncan? Estaba Marino Mejía, estaban todos esos dirigentes tradicionales dominicanos. Y fue esta organización que te hablo, la FADO, quien presentó un proyecto ante el Congreso Dominicano. Yo era el presidente de la FADO en ese tiempo. Todavía tenemos toda esa documentación que se la podemos proveer, para que a los dominicanos se les diera la doble nacionalidad. Y se logró. A partir de ahí, nosotros en esta campaña de ciudadanía que estábamos haciendo en los 85, 88, 90, nos dimos cuenta que aunque había muchos dominicanos que se querían hacer ciudadanos, habían otros que rehusaban hacerse ciudadanos porque perdían su nacionalidad de origen. Entonces nosotros, la alternativa que nosotros buscamos fue entonces la doble ciudadanía. Entonces ahí es que nace el proyecto de la doble ciudadanía. Entonces cuando se aprueba el proyecto de la doble ciudadanía en la República Dominicana, los dominicanos comienzan a hacerse ciudadanos en masa. Esto fue una contribución enorme para quitarle la limitación que tenía el dominicano o la resistencia que tenía algún segmento de la población dominicana de hacerse ciudadano de los Estados Unidos. Porque algunos decían, bueno, yo estoy traicionando mi patria y tú tienes que respetar mucho eso a gente que te dice, bueno, yo no me hago ciudadano de este país porque yo no voy a perder mi ciudadanía de origen. Entonces ahí es que se hace, que nosotros le buscamos esa alternativa. Entonces, en 1991 es que se elige a Guillermo Linares como el primer oficial electo de origen dominicano en los Estados Unidos, pero que se elige también aquí en Nueva Jersey a una dominicana que pasó desapercibida porque, tú sabes, Nueva York es la gran metrópoli y Guillermo copó la atención de la prensa, pero en ese mismo año se elige a aquel palacio en Inglewood Cliff. De ahí es que después nacen las organizaciones políticas, de ahí nace el DIPA, ¿te acuerdas? Y luego nace la Conferencia de Asuntos Dominicanos.
Over the past 5 decades, Dominicans have made a presence across the United States in every area of this society.
I've never been asked to speak about my life back home, back in the Dominican Republic. I was very poor, very poor. I remember days in which I didn't have food at noon. You know, we usually have the strong meal, the heavy meal at noon. And I remember coming from school and going home and knowing that I was not going to have a meal. I remember that I wanted to read because I have a lot of questions, and I didn't have books at home. Simply didn't have books. The transition coming to the U.S. You know, my parents were already here, and they used the fact that my little brother was born here, and that sort of helped them to petition us, and this is how I came. Here I am with a high school diploma from the Dominican Republic. I don't remember exactly which college I went to. They said, this is no good. You know, I have my high school diploma, this is no good. What you need is to have a high school diploma from here. I took the exam and I waited for the results at home. And when I got it, it was fine. I made it. So I went to Lehman and I was accepted into this bilingual program. After my BA at Lehman College, then I went to New York University to do a master. I finished the master, I'm doing fine, and I'm doing now my PhD in history at NYU, and everything is going fine. But some professors in the history department at NYU kept saying, Ramona, you are very good, but somehow this is not history. I liked what I was doing, but for whatever reason, something was missing. And this is when I met Fran Bonilla, my mentor. He was good because he said, I think you're in the wrong place and in the wrong discipline. Right there, you had to come to us. I became an academic, a scholar prior to getting my PhD. So when I got the PhD, I already had some infrastructure, if you want, there in terms of the academic thing. But the formal writing, like books, stuff like that, of course, came afterwards.
Ramona, as a junior faculty member, as a faculty member who was working on her dissertation, had very strong ties to women organizations and community groups. And so people who are academic and people who are community leaders both see themselves represented in Ramona's election to head the Institute and also to represent minorities and immigrants.
The Institute for Dominican Studies is the only research unit focusing on Dominicans outside the Dominican Republic. There are many questions that people have concerning Dominicans. Basic information. How many are they, for instance? Are they assimilating? Questions that demand research, and that's what we're doing here, encouraging people to do this.
We have incidents in business, in the arts, in education, in government, in science, in every aspect
I became an inventor by necessity, as this woman suffered from diabetes and there was nothing out there to detect sugar in beverages, and I just took it up to myself to do that great task. And it was very simple. It's so simple that people just saying, how can I didn't think about that? It's simple. It's an invention that it's a strip in which you dip it and you see it. Simple. You want to know if your product contains sugar, you just have to insert the strip and then you will know. Then you'll make a decision. The big part about this is that give people control. And everybody has to have so much control about your life, and that gives you control. That gives anybody who wants to know whether it's sugar or not, control, and that's all. I think that whenever you find control, that you could control your life, it's fine.
My name is Jalissa Marenko. I am the president of ZGS Communications Station Group. ZGS Communications is the largest independent owner of Telemundo stations across the country, Telemundo being Spanish language television here in the United States. My mother is from the Dominican Republic, from Barahona, and my father is from El Salvador, from un pueblo, Tecoluca, that's named Tecoluca. They met in the late 60s in New York City, really the only place that I think a Dominican and Salvadorian would happen to meet and get together, and they married, and fast forward 40 years, they're married and have 2 children, myself and my brother. What it means to me to be Dominican, when people ask me, what are you? I'm always kind of funny, and I say, well, I'm a girl. But I also then follow up with, I'm Dominican, Salvadorian, American. I consider myself born and bred in this country. I am as American as apple pie as can be, and I am also simultaneously as Dominican and Salvadorian as can be.
I'm Diogenes Abreu, and I'm a Dominican writer living in Washington Heights, Manhattan, New York.
Well, one of the major problems that we have as writers is that because some other ethnic groups were already here and had the power to decide who will be included in a anthology of literature, and Dominicans are new, we don't have that power, therefore we've been left out of some of the most important anthologies about literature in the United States, and that's both English and Spanish. And I think that's really unfair, because the quality of the work that we produce here is, as good as the quality of the work that other groups are doing.
The competition it's hard. The Dominicans who are writing are competing with other Latinos who might be, better known to the presses. The other things that we need to take into account, and this is something that we had talk about here in the Institute, is that in many of the institutions, a foundation, for instance, presses, for instance, we don't have people of Dominican ancestry working on those places.
All books about Dominicans that existed on the academic market were written by non-Dominicans, and their interest in Dominicans was primarily Dominicans as birds of passage, Dominicans as people who live 1 foot here, 1 foot there, back and forth, shuttling between the 2 countries. Dominicans who were in the United States invested in preparing, plotting their way back home.
I'm the youngest of 6 girls, and we came with my family in 1978. My dad, in 1975, he was able to get a permit to come to the U.S. and work here, and he worked as a taxi driver in New York City until he had gathered enough money and enough legal assistance to get the rest of the family here to the U.S. And in 1978, he was able to bring all of us, the entire family, to New York. And we lived in New York City for a few months, and I think then he recognized that was a tough place to raise 6 girls. So we moved to Providence, Rhode Island, where he had friends who had offered him work, or had told him that there would be work there for him if he moved there. So I grew up in Rhode Island. When I was young, my mom would always say that I was very good in math, and I think coming to this country and having English as my second language, I probably gravitated more towards numbers. And when I was in the 5th grade, I was introduced to a program that encouraged minorities to pursue engineering, science, and math careers. And through this program, I met a lot of engineers, and every engineer that I met was doing something different. And because I wasn't sure what I wanted to do, I thought if I went into engineering, there would be many jobs that I could pursue in the future. Later on, when I was in high school, surprisingly, my high school counselor actually tried to discourage me and said that I should consider another career. And luckily, I had enough sense not to listen to him and went on to pursue an engineering degree at the University of Rhode Island, which was a little different because engineering is very much a male-dominated field. I wasn't ready to go into academia and ran across a very interesting field called technology transfer, which works to transfer technologies that are developed either in a lab or a university, usually with government funds, out to the marketplace. And to me, this seems like a great intersection of my skills and my interest. I really enjoy working with people, and I found that ensuring that these amazing scientific discoveries that were being developed in our national laboratories and our universities would make it out to the marketplace. And so that's how I got involved in technology transfer.
We have a go from engine start. 3 engines up and ready. 3, 2, 1, 0. Booster ignition and liftoff of Discovery, blazing a trail to scientific discoveries aboard Space Station.
Houston, Discovery, roll program. 5 to roll, Discovery.
I was on the cover of Sports Illustrated in '94. I was the National Player of the Year coming out of high school. Myself and Allen Iverson fought for that position. So I was chosen to be in the cover of Sports Illustrated, which to me at that time did not understand how huge and how incredibly heavy that was going to be on my whole career, for the best, for the positive way. So I would just stay in La La Land. I was like, la 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 la, oh yeah, basketball, whatever. But that was huge. It was an incredible moment for me, because I never actually thought that I would just have that opportunity to, and mind you, understanding how huge the NBA game is in Dominican Republic. We used to watch the Lakers Boston series back then, and we had to understand like technology have grown so quickly. But back then, we had the channels where you got to turn on the way in, and cable was not cable. Cable was pretty much one of the hangers that you used to put around in the TV, and you got to try to find the signal somewhere. And aside from that, in DR we do have blackouts, so you have to understand that sometimes you might be in the middle of the most interesting game or telenovela, and there he goes, he's gone. So we used to watch the games, and interested enough, we used to get the games with like 2-3 weeks delay, meaning like the game happened like 2-3 weeks before. Then we used to get in DR. Pretty old games, But to us, we used to watch like it was the live game. It was the most interesting thing. Just the fact that we was watching NBA players on TV was the greatest thing. So for me to actually have that opportunity to be called as an elite athlete for the NBA and be drafted, it just gave me the chill and just put me on that moment when I used to be back in the yard sitting, watching these NBA players playing. Now I was part of that. Now I was part of history. Or maybe some younger kid probably might watching me on TV and probably thinking about the same thing. But the only difference was that I came from Dominican Republic, so now I have someone that I can relate to, as in difference to, you know, the Michael Jordans, the Magic Johnson that, you know, so many people know. Just you know, great American symbols, idols. But for me to be Dominican, it was really, I was on cloud nine. It was just a great blessing to me. That my first year, I was still flowing. Like I was still like, you know, just going to every single arena, and the support that I was getting from so many, not just Dominican, Puerto Riqueño, Mexicano, Venezolano, because I was one of the only Latinos, one of the only Hispano playing in the NBA around that time. And the recognition that I was getting from so many people, and you know, to see the Dominican flag just wave throughout all the arenas was just it was an amazing moment.
Hi, my name is Julie Bencosme. I'm a full-time faculty member at Hostos Community College, and I am the only Dominican woman with tenure at this institution. My father's name is Julio Cesar Rodriguez. He came to this country in 1961, and he is a pioneering Dominican. And my father taught us a great sense of pride in our heritage. He taught us how to speak the language. He taught us where we were from and never to lose that, and never to lose our identity. He was also involved in many, many different activities here in the United States, especially New York City, and he is also co-founder of the Dominican Day Parade, a parade which is now in its 29th year of existence.
My name is Anthony Stevens Acevedo. I'm a historian by training. I'm assistant director at the CUNY Dominican Studies Institute. I have done especially research on Dominican early colonial history for a long time, before coming to the DSI. And here at the CUNY Dominican Studies Institute, I'm right now in charge of supervising the several initiatives we have in terms of research on Dominican colonial history, or periods of the Dominican past that are related to the colonial period. There's other researchers that are doing more contemporary history, very interesting projects, but insofar as I know, I'm the only one doing colonial history or early colonial history, 16th and 17th century. It's a period that overall still needs a lot of research and study. Even in the Dominican Republic, there's very little being done.
Well, faith is a very important part of Dominican culture, but faith not as an institution, faith as something that comes out of the Dominican heart. The most poor, strange individual in the middle of the mountain who don't attend a church have this pantheistic way of looking at God, looking at his ancestors, believing in something for Dominicans are very important. So faith is defined as something that you believe without seeing. So Dominicans, in their own language, in their vocabulary, they say things like, I'm going to do this if God allow me, or if God willing, I will. Even the ojalá part of the language denotes this faith in Dominican people. Then there is organized religion. 95% of all Dominicans are Roman Catholic. And also faith is such an important in almost every decision that Dominicans do in their lives, to the point that we consider Dominicans magic religious people. Well, the 2 million Dominicans, I will say that they go to church, more than 50% go to church. And that is important because I said that they bring with them this faith, and that's a significant number. In terms of using that faith for political and social changes, I only could speak from the Protestant point of view, because the Protestant, I cannot venture to say that they are following the model of the African American, but they do. They have these ideas that they get in seminary about using their theological training for emancipation and using it for the purpose of organization, and they use that as their base. And I say it's a giant that is still sleeping, but it's a giant.
Well, I became a politician. I guess I It just became part of the process. I study actually government in college. I have a BA and a master's in public administration. And it's a funny thing that in college they don't teach you the marriage between government and politics, which is something that you cannot sever. I think you only take intro to politics, and then you take a bunch of management courses, and they don't teach you that without politics there's no government, without government there's no politics. And I think it was a transition to see how we can provide some assistance to the people through politics, which is also part of government. I think it's time for the Dominican community to come together, which is not a simple thing to do. It's simply to say, let's come together and work together. But there are many different things that come into play when we talk about that. But it's important at the end of the day that we understand that our futures are intertwined, that one individual Dominican in New York is intertwined with mine. That when a Dominican is corrupt, they feel that every Dominican is corrupt. Even in the speech that Dr. Silvio Torres Allan said for the psychopathology of like Dominican leadership, it was that for some reason, the press, the media, even our peers don't call us Latinos when it comes to politics. It's almost like, everybody else is Latino but Dominicans. Once you're elected, you're not a Latino elected official, you're a Dominican elected official. Almost pulling people to the side and saying, you know what, you're not part of us. And I think that that's something that Dominicans need to emphasize, that we're a part of the group just as much, and that we're willing to work with other communities just as much.
Dominicans, I think, face this problem that they are seen as too ethnic if they invoke their own name. Yeah? So perhaps it'll take a while for that to go away. But what Dominicans can do in the meantime is to say Latinos when they mean Dominicans. Yeah? The way the other groups do. The other groups say Latino when they mean Mexican. They say Latinos when they mean Puerto Rican. Dominicans should say Latino when they mean Dominican. So we, Latinos of Washington Heights, this should be our agenda for the benefit of Latinos in Washington Heights, or Latinos in the South Bronx, or Latinos, that sort of thing. Basically, because the other one is an issue of to wait until that problem gets resolved. That it'll take a bit because it's an evolution. The fact is that Dominicans produce fear. Because Dominicans are seen as people who just arrived, they're off the boat, and they want their an equal share of power. That's the perception.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic.
My name is Jocelyn Peña Melnick, and I'm a state delegate in the Maryland General Assembly. As a Dominican American woman in politics, I bring a different perspective to the table, one that is rich in culture and diverse. I got involved in politics because I wanted to be a voice for my community. When I was growing up, I always wanted to be a lawyer. When I grew up, I was growing up in Washington Heights, New York. And I wanted to be a lawyer to give people a voice, to represent their rights and to fight for them. And I have done that. In politics, the bills that I have introduced have also done that. They actually deal with social justice, with civil rights. I'm not done yet. I have a lot to do still, but I have truly enjoyed representing my community. I would tell the 2 million Dominicans that we have in the U.S. to get an education, to become involved in their community, to try to make a difference and to remember where they come from so they can make us all proud.
I think it is important to make it clear that the remarkable Dominicans, that there are remarkable Dominicans that never get to reach the limelight, because they are being remarkable in areas where cameras don't go. And if there were a way in the documentary to stress that these Dominicans who have achieved great public things are only as great as others who have achieved great things, but they have achieved them in places which do not make it easy for them to become so public.
How I see Dominicans 20 years from now is that we will have more members in the communities, more vibrant communities throughout the country. We will have more businesses. We will have more educators, more professors. We will have more people participating in government, General Assembly, in the Senate, and city councils, mayors. We will be in Congress. We may even have, no, I won't say we may. Well, there'll probably be some discussion about that a Dominican American, of a heritage of Dominican American, is being considered to be President of the United States. That's what I envision 20 years from now, because it is possible.
3 engines up and ready. 3, 2, 1, 0. Booster ignition and liftoff of Discovery, blazing a trail to scientific discoveries aboard space station.
Houston, Discovery, roll program. 5 to roll, Discovery.